Hey guys, Cubehamster here and welcome to a new Redstone video. Out of nowhere on Halloween. As some of you that follow me on Twitter, I've been kind of playing around with the new snapshot. I think it's 23W something, I don't know. But it introduces the crafters and it introduces like the new copper blocks, and kudos to Mojang. Like these are all these new additions are absolutely great, and I think they will kind of revitalize the redstone part of Minecraft. But been basically messing with the crafting system a bit and ended up making this device, which is a automatic pumpkin farm, which I shared on Twitter, kind of as a sort of like a joke. It's super inefficient. But I went back to the drawing board after that, did some tinkering, and I kind of made it 40% smaller and twice the speed. And it's now slowly getting to the point where it might, if you have too many resources, actually be worth it to have this device in your world. The way it works is you have a bunch of chickens that lay eggs. There's only 2 of them. That's more than plenty for this thing. And then we have some sugar cane that grows, that gets converted into sugar. And then finally we have 2 pumpkin stems, which will produce pumpkins, and those will get fed into the machine as well. And then once there is 1 of each in the machine, currently we're waiting for pumpkins. That's kind of the bottleneck of this device. Once they're all there, this will generate a pumpkin pie. I did a small test. I think it generates a pumpkin pie like every 12 minutes, which is bad. But again, you literally have to do nothing. Occasionally, you just walk by and be like, hey, bunch of free pumpkins. So let's actually change the tick speed. Kind of show it in action. Maybe we have to speed it up even more. Because again, we're waiting for the pumpkin. I think it did something actually. And then it gets fed into the crafter, and once there's 1 of each, it gives a pie. And this thing is like solid. It's reliable. You don't have to touch it. And I'm going to show you how to build it, and I'm going to show you how you can customize this. It does spill over some like sugarcane every now and then. You probably want to encase this. I'll show you how you can use this to make other crafters that have a low influx of items. Like I play survival, I don't like making big farms. It's too much work and you get way more resources than you need. I like small stuff like this. Yeah, with these sort of crafting setups that you can kind of see in the background there, you can essentially make anything. So you could also just have 1 setup, and then all of a sudden when you have to make a whole bunch of stuff, you just put stuff in there and it just auto-crafts stuff. I'm doing a layered tutorial, so I'm just going to do 1 step at a time, and then occasionally I will explain a bit of the things that are happening, but I'm not going to go extremely into depth on what's going on. Just very like broad strokes. So let's get started. Okay, starting out with the first layer, which is the foundation. The foundation is 4 blocks by 7, and the entire device is going to be 7 blocks tall. And as we're starting, you're immediately you have to make a design decision of kind of where you want the output to be. At the moment, I have a crafter hooked up into a barrel, but this can also be a chest. So you can have a chest like this, and like I have the output towards the side, but there's nothing stopping you from setting up the device like this and then having it go into a chest. So that's a design decision you have to make, and depending on what you do, like your chest will end up like this or something else. But I'm going to do the tutorial with the barrel I don't know, like you produce so little, you produce so little pumpkin pies that a barrel is more than sufficient. I'm just gonna put this back, and then fill out the crafter or lock the thingies, and then put the redstone block back. Then, as you might be noticing, I'm using a different texture pack. This is kind of a combination of a texture pack by Mary the Lapis Demon for the redstone dust, and then Redstone has made some tweaks so that we can actually tell which way observers and such are facing, and the same with like hoppers and stuff. So you can just Google that if you're interested in that yourself. But if you're wondering, like, what are these arrows? They are here to help you. Because again, I'm not going to build the thing in a video and you watching it. I'm just going to go over it layer by layer. So now that you have the foundation, let's move on to the next layer. Like I mentioned, the arrows kind of show what way things are pointing. So here we have a hopper line going into the auto crafter. And a couple of the slots are open. That's where the items are going to end up. I guess an interesting thing to know about how the crafter works is depending on how many slots are filled, it's going to give a signal. So if I take redstone dust and place a thing here, and I have to be smart and actually remove this. At the moment, 6 of the slots are filled because I just disabled them. So the output of the auto crafter is 6. And by having a composter that is fully filled, just so you can see like the bone meal stuff, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 8 from the output of the crafter. And the reason we do this is if the crafter is completely full, we get an output. And that's kind of what we want. When there is one of each in the crafter, that's when we want it to craft the pumpkin pie and put it into the barrel. Then I guess another thing that I've kind of overlooked in the previous design, like these blocks here are copper bulbs. And a couple of them are on now. It doesn't really matter. This is just in order to transmit a signal. What does matter though is the pistons at the end here, sticky pistons with dispensers, with observers facing downwards. And what this is going to do is once we have one of each item, the sticky pistons are going to pull the observer above the lamp, and that lamp is going to just switch state once. And the reason we're doing that is we're kind of going to be using the pistons as an inverter, or to invert the signal in a tilable, sensible way. But we're going to go through that later on. And then finally, another thing that we have here is the redstone lamps. Redstone lamps are interesting when they receive a signal from an observer. They turn on and off. And what that allows you to do is essentially turn a single one pulse into 2 pulses. So if I activate this observer, the piston is actually going to trigger twice. So it's a way of just quickly turning a single signal into 2 signals shortly after each other. The reason for that is going to become more clear as we progress. So the next layer is not a lot of interesting things are happening. There was one interesting thing happening that I will show you. First off, we have a couple observers reading from the lamps, kind of like I showed you earlier. Then we have some barrels above the hoppers, just as a sort of temporary throughput. And then we have a bunch of slabs that we're going to be using for other components to be placed on top of. And then we have a line of copper blocks at the end, which we'll use in order to... Oh, actually I'm missing a block here. Which we'll be using to send signals towards the piston later on. So we're just kind of laying the foundation. But there's one interesting thing happening here, and that is what I mentioned earlier. So we have the crafter with the 3 open slots, and then the observer goes into a block, and above the block we no longer have the redstone dust, but we have a copper bulb and then a observer going into just a redstone dust signal. And what this does is if I take an egg and I take a pumpkin and I take a sugar and we put one of each in this device, the lamp will go on, a signal will be detected by the observer because of the switching of state, and redstone dust will be sent towards the crafter, and the crafter is going to craft with the items that are in there, which is going to deliver us our first Halloween pumpkin pie. So that's kind of how you automate the auto crafting aspect the moment that enough items are in the crafter. But before we can bring items into the crafter, we have to do a bunch of stuff. First off, I mentioned the piston line. So you can place a bunch of redstone dust here, and the moment you add all these torches, the pistons will extend. That's fine. Just kind of like this. And that's going to do a thing. That is going to trigger the copper bulb at the bottom and send the signal towards the lamp that goes on and off. And that will turn these copper bulbs on this layer on and off. So as an example, like I mentioned earlier, the double signal on off. And this does nothing. So the moment the torches go out, that's when they turn on and off. And they go out because we're reading with a comparator from the hoppers that we place above these barrels. And at the same time, the signal that is coming from these copper bulbs, we're actually going to send it back into the hopper. So we're kind of like letting the signals go in a loop. And what's interesting about this, we can kind of already do that, getting ahead of ourselves, is if we power these lamps, we'll get a signal going into the hoppers, essentially locking them. The red line indicates that the hoppers are now locked. That means that if I take an egg and I put it in this hopper, it's going to stay in there. It's actually not going to feed into the items below. But if I then add the pumpkin as well, and like if you're paying attention, you can probably already see what's happening. Some of these lamps have turned off now. And then if we go towards the final one and we add the sugar, and we put the sugar in there, did you see how the lamps turned on and off? And the hopper locks went on and off. And then for just a brief moment, all the items were fed into the crafter, giving us another pumpkin pie. As you can see, all the pumpkins are gone, and now all we have is a pumpkin pie. Now what we do besides that is we read from the crafter up here, and we actually send sort of an extra signal. We detect that we've crafted something with the observer, and we send that signal back down this line up here in order to essentially send another signal. And what that's going to do, if we go back towards our pumpkins, but now instead of one we have two, and we go to our sugar, but now instead of one we have two, and we go to our egg, but now instead we have one we have two, and we do two pumpkins here, two sugar here, and two eggs here, it is actually going to send a signal, and instead of crafting one pumpkin, it crafts two. So what we've added now is the detection to essentially keep cycling through the ingredients that are in the hopper, making the start of our crafter. But we're not quite there yet, though. Before I continue with the full layer of the auto pumpkin farm, I'm going to do a quick intermission. And the reason I want to do that is because I actually want to show you how you can make any factory, not just a pumpkin pie factory. What we're going to do is we're going to place hoppers facing downward on top of the hoppers we already have. And then we are going to have target blocks right next to the hoppers we just placed with redstone dust. What's happening is we should lock the hoppers below again by just briefly having this powered. Most likely these lamps are already on for you, but we're going to be locking these hoppers. And what will happen is if I get an egg once again and I feed that into the top hopper is going to drop it into the hopper below, but there it's going to remain stuck. And when stuck, it's going to be able to be read by this comparator, powering this redstone dust for just a power of 1. But because there is a target block here, it will actually have a powered block next to the hopper above, locking the hopper above. And what that means is if I now have another item here, the hopper is actually not going to suck in the item. So essentially we are first locking the item in the hopper below and then locking the hopper above. And I'm going to go a little bit into detail why we are doing that in the next step. And then the next thing we're going to do is from the detection of crafting. Yeah, we already took a signal and we send it towards the pistons. But what we're also going to do is get that same signal and just briefly send a signal up here, essentially turning off all the torches, which will and then send a signal retracting the pistons, sending a signal through the loop. The reason we're coming up with such a convoluted system is because we want things to happen when we have an uncertain influx of items. I'm actually going to skip this step because I kind of already showed what I wanted to show there and go on to the next step. Like I mentioned earlier, I do not like building farms. I like just like farms take a lot of effort and you get way more items than you need. And the way this is set up right now, I have another hopper going into the thing that we just made earlier. The lamps are already on and I want it to make pumpkin pies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a machine and it's going to give 1 sugar and it's going to have 2 eggs. And then it's going to finally at some point give me my final pumpkin. And that will trigger the machine and give me a pumpkin pie. But I already had 2 eggs. And I want my machine to not break regardless of what I like spam with the influx of items. So the reason we're doing this is sort of a safety line, essentially making sure that no disruptive signals from all of a sudden items being added to my my system will overflow the system. And deliberately I'm feeding in stuff from another line because I never want, if I have a bunch of pumpkins, like I don't want the pumpkins to immediately feed and run through my system. I want to make absolutely sure that there's only going to be 1 item of each going through once I know that it is safe to do so, once all the items are there. But this is in essence the foundation of this factory. You can kind of already see in the background here, like this system is tilable. So I've now set up the exact same system as here, but just with 4 extra modular segments. And this time, if you're looking at the ingredients that we'll be adding, we will be crafting redstone comparators. And at the moment, looking at the lines, we seem to be missing some quartz, and we seem to be missing a torch, and we seem to be missing a stone. Now I can grab them from here. And like I mentioned, some torches could be added here, torch here, and then maybe some stone comes in. And then now when we add like the final quartz, the system will trigger, it will fill the item, and then it will craft it. And only once again there is one of each in the system will this machine actually craft the next thing. Now there's only a matter of like how do you set up the crafter. Like the pumpkin pie is not specific with the order, but if you want any other sort of recipe, we have a hopper line coming in, and then what it will do, it will basically fill out items in your crafter from top left down to bottom right. So what you need to do is you need to get a crafting bench. Oh, crafting bench. You need to figure out like, I have a comparator. How do I make that? Apparently, I need a torch. Then I need a torch, a quartz, a torch, stone, stone, stone. And then we just make it so that when the items come in, I have a torch, a quartz, a torch, a stone, and a stone, and a stone. And once the items are one of each there, with my recipe, apparently I'm still missing something. Oh, I'm missing an extra stone. It will fill it out, and it will give you your item. And you can change this on the fly. You have to make sure that like there's not any more like items in the system. You see there's a torch here, but technically if you flush this system, you can easily swap the ingredients and make it craft something else. All the way up to crafting recipes that require 9 items. So this is at the heart the auto crafter design that I came up with. And there might well be designs that are better, but what I like about this is that it doesn't care about the influx of items. You don't have to pre-fill the crafter, and it will never break. So yeah, small intermission. Now let's continue with the actual pumpkin pie factory. So now that we have the auto crafting part, we need to start worrying about all the items that we need to turn into the pumpkin pie. So if you had these hoppers set up like this, I recommend you remove them. That was just the show. That's why it's called the intermission. Now we're going to start worrying about, for instance, the foundation for the sugarcane. So we have 2 dirt patches, which we'll be using for the sugarcane. And then we have a mangrove root. Yeah. Which we can add a water bucket to make it float and not completely like wash away all our redstone. Then we have hoppers going into an auto crafter that is facing into another hopper pointing down. And the auto crafter has no like pre-filled disabled slots. It's going to be completely open. And this is going to be making the sugar. So sugarcane fed into autocrafter, going into hopper. So this is going to be the sugar line, the outer barrel. And then on the opposite end, we're going to lay or start laying the foundation for our pumpkin growth detection system. So 2 observers facing into each other, and then with copper bulbs on the outside. And the safety line that I already showed earlier stays the same. But that is this layer. Just 2 more layers to go. Now we're getting to a little bit more of the complicated stuff. First off, interesting, we add we have a comparator coming out of this crafter to craft the sugar. And kind of what we did earlier with this crafter to detect once it's completely full, we're doing something slightly different here. We are actually going to detect once there is just one thing in the crafter, and that's because the crafting recipe for sugar is literally just 1 sugarcane turning into sugar. And we can actually detect one item going into the crafter just by reading a comparator, then observing that with the observer. And we're going to be not on this layer, but we're going to end up feeding that into the, I can actually already kind of show that. We're going to be feeding that into the crafter, and then that's going to spit out an item into the hopper. So let's actually just show that off. So if there is one sugarcane in here, it immediately gets fed into the hopper and being locked in the layer below. Then what we have is a bunch of hoppers here that are exposed. I use the copper grates here, or just transparent blocks. I really like the way these function like glass. But I guess they're a bit expensive. You could also use glass, but they need to be full blocks, just so that items don't spill over between different hoppers that they're not supposed to. This is going to be the chicken hole. So that's the egg part. And then with a couple grates here and another mangrove root, this is going to be the pumpkin line. So we're going to be adding some dirt. You have to hoe the outer sides. And the fact that the mangrove water is here is going to be enough to water the hoed dirt. And then we're going to have a bunch of upward facing observers on the middle observers and downward facing observers here. And what this is going to do is this is going to send a signal once the pumpkin is fully grown into a piston to break the pumpkin. And the piston is going to push it into this hopper line, which will feed into the final hopper for our final ingredient. And then finally, we have the railroad tracks, and these are going to be home for some hopper minecarts that will make it so that we don't accidentally spill over our ingredients into the wrong hopper. And I placed some fences here, and that's in order to, I guess we can kind of already do it now. I'm going to have some hopper minecarts. Because I want these to kind of be above the place where the sugarcane is going to grow, and also where the eggs are going to be, where the chickens are going to be, just to make absolutely sure we spill as little as possible and nothing spills over into adjacent hoppers. And then you've made it so far. Finally, the final layer and the last finishing touches. What we want to do is actually, let's start with the pumpkin part. So we have the observers facing upwards, going into pistons to break the pumpkins. And then finally an observer that detects the state of the stem. And I guess we should get some pumpkin seeds now, so you can kind of see what's happening. So the moment any update happens on this square, the individual piston will activate. This is not a quiet machine, by the way. I'm pretty sure you've already determined that by the chicken noises and stuff. But it's not going to be constantly making noise. Let's bone meal this. And now when the pumpkins grow, the stem kind of like arches over. That is detected by the observer, and it immediately gets broken. And there's not really any chance of it not ending up in a hopper. It's really reliable. So that's kind of a small part. The sugarcane part is a little bit bigger. We have a piston here to destroy the sugarcane that's going to be growing. I'm going to remove the fence posts carefully without touching the hoppers, like so and so. And first off, the growth of the sugarcane is going to be detected by an observer facing this way, which will eventually lead up into a solid block, which will power a piston, and it's a sticky piston with a observer, and oh, we actually got a pumpkin. And what's interesting about this, it's actually making a pumpkin pie now, is that normally when you loop like this and you detect an extending piston, you kind of get into a clock situation. But because this only works, it only sends a signal on the extending part of the piston, it's kind of like a rising edge detector, they would call it. You don't actually get that. So now when this grows, it doesn't create a clock. It sends the signal like this. But because we have room here for another sugarcane, we can actually use the part of the clock or the growth of one of the sugarcanes to also break the other. There is an instance that this sugarcane takes so long to grow that it kind of looks like this. I mean, you could add a roof to this if you don't really want that. But yeah, I personally I don't really care. I think it's kind of funny. But there is an issue here now that could arise, and that is that so much sugar ends up in the crafter that yeah, it crafts once, and then there's just a bunch of sugar in there still left over. So what we need to do is the breaking of the sugarcane needs to actually first trigger the crafter to clear out any sugarcane that is still inside. And the signal that we're using to cycle or to kind of loop and break the other sugarcane, we are also actually going to, via a copper bulb, send a signal to also preemptively empty the sugarcane. This is all just redundancy to make sure that there's no situation that for whatever reason 3 sugarcane arrives at the same time, breaking or locking the crafter. Because you can have a situation where there's already a bunch of sugar in there. I guess I can actually kind of fake that by having a bunch of sugarcane 2 in the machine. And now there's actually already sugarcane in the machine, so this comparator is already triggered. But by having that, we can actually clear it out and kind of resolve this sort of broken state of the machine. And then there's the final, somewhat inhumane part, and that is we need chickens that are going to be living in a very small space. And I don't really like that, but it is a video game. So I will accept it for the redstone. It is important that the chickens are centered in this layout. I mean, you get the same result by destroying eggs. I'm just going to cover this up. 2 chickens is more than enough. I haven't actually tested it, but it might actually work with even 1 chicken. But it's funny enough actually already creating pumpkin pies. So there, that is your machine. I kind of look forward to see what other sort of devices you guys can come up with. Maybe there's a way to make this even smaller. Like, I've been out of the redstone scene for quite some time. But this could be an interesting addition to your survival world. Just passively generating pumpkin pies while you're not looking or not doing anything. And then occasionally you go by and you collect your stash of pumpkin pies. So yeah. And that is how you build a pumpkin pie factory, or any factory for that matter. As you guys know, I've not really been doing a lot of redstoning lately, but this stuff has been very refreshing. So who knows, maybe more videos in the future, but no guarantees. Because as a lot of you guys know, I am currently creating video games with yeah, a group of very talented individuals under the banner of Enchanted Works. If you haven't checked out Nomori, we have a free-to-play prologue on Steam, and we're very hard developing the next iteration of that. Soon we'll be doing a bunch of playtesting. So if you like the previous game and you're interested in following the development, I'll put a link in the video to our Discord where you can hop in and maybe help with some playtesting. So just a slight plug at the end there. Something I really enjoy. It's an awesome project. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.